guest slogan is creating solutions that keep people out of court. Mediator Jeffrey Bloom agrees with mine. Divorce is about relationships and cannot be adjudicated. Brilliant minds think alike, wouldn't you say, Jeff?
Absolutely.
All right. A world where common sense approaches to alternative dispute resolution systems, such as our field of mediation, have become the norm, and it's about time. And welcome, Jeff Bloom.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Let's start with where are you and what do you do? And I know you're a mediator like me, but where are you?
I have 2 offices on Long Island, in Garden City and in Smithtown. And ADR professional, mediating, helping create solutions, keep people out of court, giving them an option, let them know what I think people should be educated about what all their options are, whether it's mediation or litigation, and then have all the facts and then be able to make a decision to go forward with everyone they want to, rather than later on saying, oh, I didn't know that was available, and so forth.
Yeah. What do you think this is certainly one of the best ways to educate the people, to put it on television and talk about mediation directly. Because to be honest with you, I don't see how anybody would not want to mediate before they litigate.
I agree.
There's no, not just because we're in the business, has nothing to do with it. But curiously, I like your slogan, creating solutions that keep people out of court. And if you notice, mine was divorces about relationships that cannot be adjudicated, lined up.
No, absolutely.
Lined up, buddy. All right, so you also do radio. You should tell people what you do.
Yes, I'm on 1240 AM WGBB on Saturday evenings from 7:30 to 8:30. The show is called The Mediator, kind of a clever name that I came up with.
Clever guy.
And my main goal was to get the word out there about mediation and let other people know it's available. I get people all the time that come up to me and say, where were you 5 years ago? And I ran out of money. And,
me too, yeah.
And it's just amazing. So again, it's just getting the word out and about mediation, and so we could all be busier.
Yeah, isn't that the most frustrating thing, though, to have spoken to somebody before the divorce and begged with them to try to mediate first before they get down that path of losing money, and something stops them?
Well, people automatically, because even though mediation's been around over 40 years, the majority of people don't know about it.
Right. And
with divorce rate in New York being over 50 or 60 some odd %, and people not knowing about it, most people are spending a lot of money going through the litigation process. So it amazes me that people still don't know that it exists,
right,
that it's an option.
Right.
And what I tell people is, and they'll call on the phone, they'll ask a lot of questions, say, come in, I'll educate you, I'll tell you how the mediation process works, go see an attorney, and then make an educated decision based on what you know.
I wouldn't do that. I do everything you said except for go seeing an attorney.
Because they ask me. They'll say, well, I don't know, should I go to an attorney? Should I go to a mediator? I don't know what to do. I'll then let them, because I don't want them to think that I'm trying to prevent them from going to an attorney.
I actually tell them at that very point in time, you may do what you choose, but I want to warn you, once you see the attorney, you'll never see me again.
Okay. And there's some attorneys like that.
For some reason or other, it just doesn't seem to work out like that. They spend their money and they'd rather blow it and throw it away.
But there are mediation-friendly attorneys out there also. And I have attorneys that I work with.
What would be the chances that you would get that mediation-friendly attorney?
Well, in all fairness, I've had a few attorneys who do litigation who have referred mediation cases to me. They feel, look, this is a basic case. No need to spend a lot of money. You should mediate the case, and they'll send them to me, and they'll call me. I'll give them a free in-office consultation, a 30-minute consultation, what I normally give. And so it happens. There are mediation-friendly attorneys. There are others, I guess majority, like you said, they'll never see you again.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
But I think it's better if they don't think you're trying to steer them away, and you want it's kind of like the mediation where the parties are in charge of the process. So you give them the information, inform them, and let them make that decision.
You got a good point, because I think if there's no balance, if there's no way to judge, if there's no alternative side that you can share with to make it comparative, then you're not really giving them the comparative.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're kind of muscling them into something.
Right.
Well, I try and do it smoothly, though, of course. Sociologically, our family courts are messed up, and one of the reasons why we want to mediate and why we become mediators to begin with is to stop people from going through that door.
Absolutely.
Similar to what we were just talking about regarding going to the attorneys or not. But the statistical information is already there. It's very clear that people who go through court are going to suffer in a greater way than they would if they didn't.
Absolutely, because they're pretty much bound by the law. The judge is making a decision based on something he or she read for maybe 30 minutes before the case comes before him and her.
Right.
Even if it gets to a judge or it gets to that point, that's 2+ years down the line at a minimum. And you can't, as the husband, wife, mom, and dad, say to the judge what you want or what your feelings are. He's going to talk to your attorney's going to talk to the judge, and his attorney's going to talk to the judge, and you don't have a say. In the mediation process, everybody's in a room with the mediator as a neutral third person, and they get to say everything that's on their mind and what all the underlying issues are and why things are so important to him and her. And even though one or both of the parties may not admit it, once they hear it from the other person actually in a room like that, in the back of their head, wow, I didn't realize it was so important to him or her, and I understand. They may not come out loud and say that.
Right, that's an important point you're making, because I think I've seen that many times before when it seems like sometimes the other party really hasn't been listening while they were together, but somehow while the mediator is there, the sounding board suddenly shows up.
Absolutely, and because they think they know what their partner's going to say because they've been married for 20 some odd years or 50 years, whatever the case may be.
The curious item I always talk about, which I want you to give me your opinion about, is the power issue. For some reason, I don't feel like anyone's really trying. You see it, that they're trying to gain power, but by the time you get to the end of mediation, you find them more in agreement than they ever could have imagined they would be.
Absolutely, because they like to be in charge of the process. They like the flexibility of mediation. There's a lot of flexibility, as you know, in regards to child support, in regards to the dividing of assets, and again, just to use an example. For example, let's say you have a couple in front of you, and based on the Child Support Standards Act, dad's got to pay mom, assume mom's a residential parent, $2,000 a month based on the children and the income and so forth. So now he says, well, I can't afford $2,000 a month. I got to have my own place to live, and I've got to eat, and I've got my own expenses. And based on the budget that they do, they figure out what it's going to cost them to live once they split up.
The wife may recognize at that point, if I can help you with this a little bit, may recognize that maybe $2,000 might have been either not enough or too much, and at least would help or understand why the amount of money that the law requires can be modified in mediation.
And you could deviate as long as you put in an agreement why you're deviating.
Right.
Look, I can't afford $2,000. I can afford $1,200, but I'm paying for Johnny's summer camp and Mary's ballet lessons, and I'm providing medical insurance. And as long as they both agree, and mom could live with that amount of child support, then they could deviate from that. You go to court, the judge is going to say $2,000. You're done. He might keep up with the payments at some point. At some point, he won't be able to. There's a breach of the agreement or the judgment in that case.
Right.
And now mom's got to find dad, bring him back to court, more legal expenses.
Right.
This alleviates all that in most cases.
Right. And one of the major reasons is primarily because you've empowered the couple to make that decision on their own. And when you've made a decision on your own, you're more likely to comply.
Absolutely, and I tell them that from the very beginning, during, and at the end of the mediation, I wouldn't want either of you to sign anything you don't feel comfortable with. The agreement's supposed to be something that you can live with not only now, but in the shadow of the future. And I like to use that term.
Shadow of the future.
Shadow of the future.
Well, that's interesting.
Because things change, and we try to you can't take consideration for everything, but things change. And as a mediator, you know some of these issues from other couples that you work with, from CLE classes and reading and things like that. So you're able to do that, not just agreement that you live with, now for the next 6 months.
That's an excellent point. And let me tell you, in the beginning, I struggled with how to structure a memorandum in some of those areas, because I knew that the targeted amount was too distant from the point where they would hope to go, that they couldn't really determine all that without enough information. So if they were with me with several unsettled issues, I had to come up with some kind of settlement on the issues in a memorandum and see if I could get them to agree with it. They were making the agreement as we went along, but the language wasn't meeting the immediacy of the time. Absolutely. So sometimes you have to create language.
You do, and sometimes they'll ask you, well, what do you think we should do? And as a mediator, you try to get away from that. You really want them to come to a solution, but sometimes they just need that help.
Right.
There's also something in the mediation world called a MED-ARB. I don't know if you've heard about it.
Mediation arbitration.
Mediation arbitration agreement. So which I haven't used yet.
Yeah.
But I've had training on it and different things. So you might have a couple come to you with 12 issues, and they just can't decide these last two. They just can't for whatever reason. Say, Jeff, look, we don't want to break up the mediation. We don't want to go to attorneys. Can you make a decision based on these two issues?
I would like to know how that could work, because I don't see that being easily done because of the...
It might not be because you've been through the process already. Now you're stepping out a neutral role.
Yeah, you're then suddenly comfortable with dealing with a mediator who's really a sounding board and listening to you and not creating anything, to suddenly somebody's going to create something for you. I'm not sure how that would work.
I'm not sure exactly either. I've done a lot of reading on it. It seems like a viable option to give to couples. Another alternative. Because mediation, as you know, is not mandatory. The couple's free to leave at any time they want to go and get attorneys, or if they feel the mediation process is not working. Most couples want it to work. They want to get it done as quick as possible, most affordable as possible, but also an agreement that they can live with at the end too, not to rush it to their detriment.
Sure. They're not seeing a judge, so there's not really anybody, there's no overseer other than them.
Correct.
The way that I like to place this in your hands now for your response would be that doesn't it make sense that you're making your own decision with your own children? Doesn't it make sense?
Does it make sense to them?
Doesn't it make sense to them?
Absolutely.
That they're making their own decisions about their own
Absolutely.
children?
And I always tell them also during the mediation is...
Why give your power away?
Right.
You know?
You won't be a husband and wife anymore, but you're still mom and dad. And you always have to get them back into the children. That the children are the children, not mention them to as the children or my daughter, my son, your type thing like that. And that kind of gets away from them. There are some mediators who use, and we discussed off the air, who have the couples bring in pictures of their children and they're on a table.
Yeah, I do that all the time.
And I've heard mediators do that. I haven't done that either, but I heard that really helps.
I
the
think
focus.
everybody stole my idea. I came up with this many years ago. I think I got the first one in on it.
Okay, I've heard of that. I think it's a good idea. I haven't introduced it yet, but
Yeah.
it's something I should consider.
Yeah, if you, I don't know, if you sit in a triad, how do you sit with a couple?
There is a conference room type. In my Garden City office, I have a large conference room table.
Yeah.
And in my Smithtown office, I have a small round table, which is a little bit more friendlier for mediation.
Right.
So I let the couples sit wherever they want to, kind of when they come into the room. And I notice a trend, which I'm sure you do too. If one sits on one end of the table and one on the other side, then there's a little more conflict than sometimes they'll sit on the same side.
Yeah, I like the three idea, so that even though they're apart, they're not completely on the other side of the table. So we separate the table, the round table,
Right.
in three places. So they have to look through the center of
closer.
the
And
table,
I do it at my
and they can
Smithtown
look through the
office, I
center.
have a
Yeah,
little
it's not a bad idea, I think. You brought something to my attention which I had seen before, but I'd like you to talk about it. It seems to work for you, and that is the Bill of Rights of children.
Yeah, it's a Bill of Rights by a judge in Westchester County, if I remember correctly.
Dutchess County.
Dutchess County. And what it is just lets a couple know what they should and shouldn't do when it comes to the children. A lot of times in divorce, when there are emotions flying, and mom will ask the kids, okay, what did dad do when this weekend, or your dad did this, oh, he didn't pay me child support, and he says, no, your mom is dating other people, whatever the case may be. They pin the children against each other.
Right.
And
That's alienation.
alienation. And the Bill of Rights kind of goes over some of those things.
Let me bring up a couple and we can share the conversation about this, okay? Let's talk about, just one of them hits me right away is choosing sides, which is kind of like what you were referring to there.
Right, not asking the children to choose sides.
Not ask the children
parents.
to choose sides.
It's a big deal.
Sure.
The children are going through a lot of emotions and everything also. Myself, as a child of divorce, I know that firsthand.
Yeah.
And it's not easy as it is. But to have your parents badmouth the other one, it can't be good for children. It just can't be.
Yeah, I grew up in an intact family, so I didn't have that luxury of knowing ahead of time. The right not to be told details of bitter or nasty legal proceedings going on between their parents. Boy, I mean, I don't know of anybody doing that, but I know accidentally yelling across from one another about what somebody did. I guess that could easily happen, but the kids don't really know about that, do they?
No, they don't. But they know whatever their parents tell them. So the parent's upset that mom or dad didn't do something based on something that the court said or something they agreed to, and then they tell the children. When you see dad tell him where's my money, or he says something about mom, well, your mom was supposed to do this, that, the other thing. That should be, their issues should be kept totally separate from the children. And when the children are with mom, it's mom's time, and when they're with dad, it's dad's time, and their parents first before anything else.
Right. Saying bad things is one of the Bill of Rights here. The right not to be told bad things about the other person's personality or character. I always like to bring up this one example, if you don't mind. You can share with me and the thought about it. When the phone is ringing in the home and they're there and the child is there and either the mother or the father could be doing this, it doesn't make any difference. Hello, it's your father or it's your mother. And this simple gesture of handing the child the phone and turning your head to the kid is a huge amount of alienation. It's a very difficult thing for them to survive.
So that's a good point. It's the body language thing that that kids pick up on. And it's just to pick up on the body language or things that children know. One of the questions on my intake form is, if there are children involved, do the children know you two are considering divorce or separation? And almost always they say no. The children know. The children know what's going on. And it's just interesting to see the answer to some of those questions.
Yeah.
They don't think the children know. They think they're too young.
Yes, it is. But I have the same question about it in my intake form too. We went to the same intake school.
but it's an interesting concept because they don't put no because they don't think they know better, but they just don't realize because they're so embroiled in what's going on, and they just think the kids don't know because they try to hide it, but children know.
You have here cross-examined by one parent after spending time with the other. I mean this person does. I guess that happens a lot.
Yeah. You know, the children are maybe with dad for the weekend or mom, and what did you do with mom? Does mom have a boyfriend? You know, does dad have a girlfriend? You know, things like that.
Yeah.
You know, things like that. Oh,
did he take you soulding? No, dad said he couldn't afford it. You know,
right, he couldn't
stuff
afford
like that. Yeah.
Or dad. Oh, dad just got a new car. Oh, he got a new car. He can't pay, he's not paying me my child support.
Support Bureau.
Yeah.
Stuff like that goes on. We
Absolutely,
know
I'm sure it does.
The untruths part. Right, not to be asked by one parent to tell the other parent's untruths. What does that refer to?
Parents' truths or untruths?
The right not to be asked by one parent to tell the other parent untruths. I guess I read that slightly wrong.
You're just basically, you know, telling the parents something they want to hear. You know, if you know, let's say they live with mom on a regular basis, more often than dad, and they know mom doesn't like dad, and mom's feeding this type of information that she thinks dad is doing, then they might support mom in those beliefs because they want mom to love them. They don't want
That's
to hate them.
alienation too.
Right.
It's a form of it, right? Some of these things I have trouble thinking about in terms of how to ask you a question, but like the right to choose not to express certain feelings. What the heck does that mean?
Not to express their...
The
Well,
right
just basically letting the children express their feelings as their feelings are, not what they think mom and dad want to hear, but what their feelings are. And not told what to do or how to feel or what to say.
Yeah, or loving parents, or not to be made to feel guilty over loving parents. I mean, some of these questions are hard to read, but you know what? It's a very good paper.
You know, it's basic
It's
stuff
a nice
that people,
guideline, yeah.
Right. And I introduce it usually if I see that's as a possibility, if it's a high conflict couple. Sometimes I'll introduce it if they're children, and I just think they just need to see it. And again, they see it, they sign it. That doesn't mean they can do it. But
No, you give that to them to make them sign it?
yeah, I say, you know, take a look at this and sign this if we get to that point. And sometimes it's just like a good break in the mediation.
Yeah.
If it's getting high conflict, if it's about the kids, and that subject comes up, and my kids don't want to see me because she's telling them not to, and she says, no, I don't. They don't want to see you because you're angry and they've seen you beat me, whatever the case may be. And then I might break something like that out to break up them. You know, let's take a break. Let's take a look at this. I'll go over it with them. I'll have them sign it. Again, it doesn't mean that they're going to abide by it, but at least now it's in front of them. They have the idea.
Yeah, I'm of the belief that I prefer, this is just me, I mean, you know, anybody can do what they want to do. That's the nice thing about mediation is we very rarely argue about process. Have you noticed that?
Very true, and I think the reason for that is everybody has so many different...
Everybody should know that. I'll say it again. The world of mediators doesn't struggle when there's a conflict among us with process.
No, because there are different processes and different forms of mediation and different way to do things. And you know, going through the different trainings and things that we go to, you hear different things. You might say, hey, that might work. I like that. Or I don't like that. You can't pick up somebody else's process if you don't feel comfortable with it and try to use it because a couple will see right through it.
Isn't it so totally unique about us? I think that's one great, terrific idea, that if we propel the idea, we should let the public know that this is a very real, and you're agreeing with me 100%, right? It's very real. We very rarely ever, you know, have difficulty and conflict of process.
No, and I don't know if I'm sure you feel the same way, but after every mediation, each session, after everyone is done, I evaluate how I did with that case. And sometimes there are cases you think you could have done something different, or you didn't know how you were going to handle that, and it's just racking your brain. I had one mediation that broke down a few years ago that to this day bothers me.
Yeah.
And sometimes
I've
by
had a
hearing
couple.
different ways that people do things, you might think, well, that might have worked. But
you know, I just want to you should be forgiven, and the reason is that we can't do everything.
no,
The other process will probably guarantee more failure. The legal process will probably guarantee more failure, but sometimes it works. But in mediation, it usually works. Everybody should know it usually does work.
Oh, absolutely.
Given enough time, it'll
I agree,
work.
but it was a situation and something that I wasn't able to resolve. And I always, you know, like I said, to this day, I think about what I could have done differently. And I've talked to some other experts, and mediators have been doing it a lot longer than I have, and they said, no, there was nothing you could do. But it's just something
That's
I
what I was
keep
trying
back
to
in my
tell
mind.
you about. You know, I think you should be forgiven because there's lots of times you can't know everything. You can't. Who can know everything?
That's
Besides Jeff Bloom, he's the only one I know.
That's true. But at least if you're always evaluating yourself and thinking about these things, that if it comes up the next time, you're prepared a little bit better.
Well,
for lack of a better way of saying
it
it.
certainly helps. Let's talk about some of the benefits of the mediation process. We are communicators, and we're not necessarily experts, but we certainly are specialists. We listen well, we learn how to listen well, and we learn how to perform language that's in their best interest without having to coerce or change their position.
And sometimes it's all you want, is somebody to listen to what they're saying.
Yeah. I ask for permission to suggest when a couple is stymieing over an issue. Permission to advance an idea. Permission to remind you what some of the other couples that I've mediated for choose to do in your situation.
I have that also.
Right?
I do it a little differently. They'll ask me, what have other couples done? So,
Yeah.
so that's a little bit easier to answer than what should we do?
Right.
So then I can throw out a couple of ideas. 'Cause
Exactly.
I have that background.
Exactly.
And
It's a very useful tool, and it's kind of like, but I ask permission for it. I don't know if you do.
Okay. No, I don't. But there's a difference. Like, for example, we talked about earlier, if the couple
Sound
says,
like a good idea? You want to buy it?
I like it.
Okay.
And I'll have to give you credit for it when I ask it.
Yeah.
So this is from Chris. But sometimes, like we said earlier, a couple will say, Jeff, what do you think we should do?" And I don't like to answer.
Yeah, I don't
that
like
way.
to answer that.
But
yeah.
if it comes a different way and
Right.
says, "What have other couples done?" Then it's a little
Exactly.
bit easier. Then I could throw 5 or 6 different scenarios on there.
Would you like me to share with you some
Yeah.
of my experience in the mediation business
And sometimes I'll
to
pick
show
one
you
of
what other
those
couples will
or
do?
something in between,
Right.
so it doesn't look like you're forcing something on them, which you're not.
We use the mediation process. Its structure basically stops people from abusing children. It's another feature about mediation that you can't do in court also, right? I mean, the system's set up for us to assist, not to destroy.
Correct. It's the solutions that you have in a mediation that keep those issues, and if there are those issues, you as a mediator have to try to tune in and know that they're there, and to see if the mediation process should go on or not. For a good example, maybe different than what you're saying, but similar, if there's a domestic violence issue, and there's one that has a power over the other, most, if not all, mediators say, "Okay, we can't mediate this," because you don't know what's going to happen once the couple leaves the room.
Tough. It's a tough place to be regarding the domestic violence issue. I've only been in one or two, I think two, in 12 years that I felt could have that issue. So I caucused with the person who I felt might be abused in that situation. And I can tell by the lack of response that there was something going on,
Right.
outside this thing. So I gave her the option to stopping the mediation process in caucus without having to say it in the air, because I told her what my feeling was about it. I never do that.
Right.
You
No,
can't. We ordinarily don't do that.
No, but sometimes it comes
But
out.
I felt compelled to do it at that moment in time, and I don't care what anybody says. I think it was the right thing to do, right? And she said, "No, I'd like to continue this. I think this is the only hope I have. I want it done as fast as possible." Okay, I'll get it done for you. And 2 months later, they were totally divorced after that one session. She was open enough to reveal her anxiety about it.
Right.
And I could read the anxiety, but I don't know of anything else. She didn't have bruises on her or anything, so I couldn't.
Right, you couldn't tell. And that's
Yeah.
in relation to the high conflict couples. I had a couple last year. There was no order of protection, and they both agreed to waive their order of protection, to mediate. And I asked them to mail it to me first, and I took a look at it, and they were both living separate and apart, so there was a little bit less danger.
Good.
I made sure that she left 20 minutes before he could leave.
Right.
But it was very high conflict, and he was very buoyant and loud in the mediation. And there was one of those cases where I thought that for sure this isn't going to go through. And after it was done, she came over to me, actually after each session, but especially then, "Jeff, thank you very much. Your calm demeanor. I never thought we'd get through this." And I'm thinking to myself, I never thought I would either. But,
Yeah.
But I was. Sometimes you just
Yeah.
don't realize how effective you're being because you're so concerned about that dynamic.
That and there's a good example you just gave about not assuming anything.
Right. You don't.
That's basically the best example I could have given, right there. What would you suggest people who might be contemplating divorce? How would you go about leading them to the process?
I would suggest them to find out about all their options, whether it be mediation, litigation, if they want to meet with an attorney and a mediator to find out what they have to say and make an educated decision. You probably ran into the same thing that I have, and we talked about it earlier. How many people come up to you all the time? Where were you 5 years ago? You know, where were you 10 years ago? We ran out of money, so we just had to get the divorce, and now there's nothing left in the savings. I wish I knew mediation existed. Again, 40 plus years of mediation, people don't know. I think
know,
it's better
it's
to make
amazing,
an
right?
educated decision, knowing what's available out there, rather than just going to one thing and then it's too late.
The couple is, we should know that the couple is designing. You want to tell, they're actually creating this. We only have a couple of minutes left, so I'm trying to speed the questions up. The couple designs their own settlement. You want to go through why that's an advantage. Why is it good for them to create?
It's an advantage because they're coming up with a solution and putting words into agreement that they could both live with, not something that a judge is going to tell them to do or an attorney is going to tell them to do because they're just done with the process.
They're not being,
all right, I'll just sign it.
They're not being forced to do anything.
Absolutely. They're signing something that they had input into. You know, the deviation from child support, like we talked about earlier. Maybe the division of assets. You know, there's a marital home.
You keep the home, I keep the retirement account,
Right,
whatever.
exactly,
Yeah.
or vice versa, right.
Yeah, you don't have to. By the way, in mediation, you also don't have to divide everything up 50-50.
No, equitable distribution doesn't necessarily mean 50-50.
Yeah.
In a mediation, for example, it means whatever they think equitable distribution is.
Equitable is equitable.
Right,
And
whatever they
if
think
it's
is fair.
equitable to the couple is fair to them, it may not be fair to you and me if we went through
And
it.
that happens all the time.
Absolutely. What else can you add to in the last minute or so to critically help couples who want to come to you rather than to go to the litigation process?
I invite couples and I'm to come into my office for a free 30-minute consultation. There's no obligation for them to do anything. I like to explain
Free consultation, right?
I explain the process to both of them and to see if they think I'm a fit for them and if they're a fit for me. And once they leave from me, at least I know that I've done all I could to at least tell them how the mediation process works. And most of them, you know, will go forward with or at least try the mediation process.
Do you field questions in that session?
Yes, I do. I
Yeah.
field questions because only when they're both together, because I don't meet with. Sometimes I'll call and say, "Can I just come in?"
Okay.
And I don't do that. And there's reasons for that. As you know, even if
Yeah.
you try to do that, and the dad comes in, "Oh, I just met with Chris. He's a great mediator. Let's go meet him on Thursday together." Mom's going to think, "Oh, what did he tell him? Chris is already on his side.
Yeah.
It's just not going to work."
Yeah, and you know, I know exactly what you're talking about. It just recently happened to me. You know, somebody was speaking to me for a while, and I kept saying, "Get her to call me
Right.
before you go any further," and then I'd hear from him again.
Yep. And I found out later on, it's a funny story, is my first two couples that I had, when I started my mediation practice, I met with the one spouse first. But I was
Yeah.
getting started, and
Yeah.
I thought
Oh,
there
it
was
can
a way to do
work.
But it works, but generally it doesn't.
Right, generally it doesn't. Thank you very much, Jeff Bloom, divorce mediator and fantastic radio personality. And your business is in Smithtown and in Garden City.
Correct.
And on Franklin Avenue in Garden City and on Manor Road, you said in Smithtown.
Smithtown,
In
yes.
Smithtown, right? Good luck to you, and thank you very much for helping us with this program. Societal and political trends are rapidly breaking down the family that once was the cornerstone of our great American culture. At FIT, we know you cannot get this information on your own, so we'll bring it to your TV every single week. My name is Chris DiMaggio, and thank you very much for watching FIT TV, and we'll see you again next week.